Welcome to Fraction of a Teacher, a podcast where two early career teachers chat about what we're learning and what we've still got to learn in the wild world of teaching. I'm Francis.
And I'm Jen. We're back, but this time it's a little different. We were PTC trainees and now we're early career teachers stepping into our first full year in the classroom. We share the reality of life as new teachers, the wins, the wobbles, and everything in between. So let's dive in.
Hi, and welcome back to Fraction of a Teacher. Hi, Francis. How are you?
Good, thanks, Jen. Good morning, and I hope you're well.
Yeah, you know what? I'm a solid 5 out of 10. I'm still battling my emails. I'm definitely feeling the length of the autumn term, but still loving being a teacher. I'm still loving being in my classroom. I'm still loving my students and feel like I'm starting to make an impact on some of them, which is some feedback I've had from them as well. And it's really what I've needed to hear, to hear that they enjoy my classes, that they feel like they're learning. I had a student tell me that they feel safe with me. And it blew my mind.
That's
Absolutely
so
blew my mind.
fundamental. But to be told that by a student, they must really feel that. That's awesome, mate. You're being amazing.
I know. I feel so happy. Like I feel like it's something like you take the small wins where you can. And that's progress for me, which actually leads nicely into what we're talking about today. So today we're going to be talking about Teaching Standard 2. But before we do that, just want to say, so that we've sent a post out on social media for when all of our episodes are going to be out this half term. A little bit chaos for us, but just trying to balance teacher and home life. And you know what? We're still learning. So we're not the finished article. We're still fraction of a podcaster.
I love it.
Maybe that could be our plenary. What fraction of a podcaster do you feel?
Maybe we should get listeners to write in and tell us. Or perhaps not. No. The feedback's appreciated. It's good. Yeah, mate, it has been busy. And we're at the stage of term in my school where we're doing quite a bit of assessment now. So I've got a huge pile of marking on my desk. And linking back to the sort of the pupils, I feel sort of almost a bit nervous, like actually, particularly the things I've taught them this term and the work I've done with them. I'm suddenly like, it's all very well that in a lesson on factorizing, they get really good at factorizing, but actually, have I helped them get to a point where they can apply that when they get a sort of test? So, tricky time of term. I think the teachers are tired, pupils are tired. It still feels like a bit of a way to go till that kind of magical Christmas period. Yeah, as you say, it's pretty intense, but I think before we know it, we're going to be looking towards that end of term. It's going to come around quick.
Yeah, we take the wins where we can. But today we're going to be talking about Teaching Standard 2, which is about how pupils learn. So promoting good progress. How do you feel about this one?
So I think it's really easy to say, promote good progress. Of course we would. And good outcomes.
Of course.
But actually, I think, again, and I think I might perhaps find this with all the teacher standards and perhaps where the ITT, ECF is useful in that it goes that next level of course we'd wish to do that, but how do you actually do that? And I think, as you said, a lot of it comes down to understanding how pupils learn and that sort of metacognition. And there's a really big bit, which I think you mentioned we should look at first, which was understanding that kind of prior knowledge and where are your pupils at? And I think we found, both of us, joining a new school, pupils we'd never met before, we started teaching them a couple of months ago. Like, we've all got our kind of rough understanding of where we might expect top set year 8, mid set year 9, bottom set year 10 to be. But how do you know where they're at and kind of meet them there? I mean, how did you kind of go about understanding that sort of level of knowledge and skills with new classes?
Did you just read my mind about the starter? That was literally my starter in my head. Honestly,
well,
I'm so proud of you. That's a very reflective question, Francis. Well done.
Well, I think it is I think starting with the starter at the start of the term is a good place to be. So come on, where did you
So that's a lot of starts, buddy. This feels like something that we didn't really get knowledge of because we didn't go into schools until like October time. So those first 4 weeks, we missed so much on the PGCE. So really good topic is how do we know where a pupil's starting point is? I stuck to the curriculum and pretty much took it from the shelf and put it into my lesson and then used my knowledge of assessment for learning and my metacognition to start understanding and getting to know my students well. The minute I started to get to know my students well, I could tell you their starting points and I could tell you where they were at. But the very beginning, it felt uncomfortable for me, I'll be honest, because I felt that I didn't know them and I wanted to know them more. And I was kind of, I guess, my my insecurity and my kind of lack of confidence came from not feeling effective. I kind of felt like I was missing the mark for a lot of my students in the class, and I was just aiming for the middle until I knew them. And it gave me a few weeks, and I started to understand them, made a lot of notes on my students in my notebook just to get to know their starting points. So who's my stretchers? Who do I need to really adapt my learning for? And yeah, so I guess I stuck to my knowledge of what good teaching looks like based on my experience of my PGCE, and then further adapted it as I got to know my students more.
Yeah. No, I think that sounds awesome. And I think you're right. It's just, as you say, you've got to aim somewhere before you've got that kind of like knowledge and understanding. But I think I underestimated probably some of the top performers, and where they were at. And I think, there were probably some pupils who in some of my early lessons thought, this is a bit boring. He's doing stuff we've done. This is not stretching. And vice versa. I think I probably overshot for some of my classes. And, a big thing for me was just looking at their work, looking at books and actually quite often going around the class at the end of the day, at the end of the lesson, just having a quick look in books at break time or lunchtime, just seeing where are they. And the do now activities I found useful as well. That kind of retrieval, the way we do this in my school, 10 quick questions right across the curriculum. And I found that quite useful, seeing how they're getting on with those, because that gave me a sort of understanding of some of those kind of core fundamental sort of concepts in maths. Actually, where are they at? And then I definitely feel like it was 2 or 3, 4 weeks before I really had a feel for where each class was and the key individuals within that. And then even so, I still find when I start a new topic, I've got a bit of an understanding, but even so, I feel like each new topic, I need to do a bit more of that as well. Just going back, actually, they might have been awesome in the last topic, but this one's quite different. It's relying on sort of different learning concepts. I feel like there's an element of continuing to do that, even with a class well.
Yeah, love that. That sounds so you. You're so good. You're such a good teacher.
I'm not convinced. We're still up for action. And so nice to hear that you're getting the lovely feedback from your pupils, because I can see that one of the key things you do so passionately care about all your pupils that, of course, that comes so much into this and understanding your pupils. And they are clearly now seeing how much you care and how much you will put your hearts on everything you do into being the best for them.
Yeah. Was it a few episodes ago? We were talking about how every pupil doesn't have the same progression. So you were saying how if one student had done something like in their book, you would be really proud. And the next you would have been like, you could push harder. Yes. I think that really feeds into here really well. And that stayed with me. That's been I'm bagging that, because that was such a good reminder of progress isn't the same for every single student in your room.
Yeah, it's going to look different. And I think another level of that, which I'm really keen to continue to sort of build on, which I love the way you're doing that sort of metacognitive approach, is that in this teacher standard, guide pupils to reflect on the progress they've made and their emerging needs. And I'll be honest, I think it takes quite a bit of confidence, a lot of teachers' confidence in the pupils to get them to do that. And I think some of my pupils, I feel, are more ready for that than others. If you've got a class of pupils who aren't quite ready for that, or you don't feel fully confident in getting them to do that, it's quite a big jump to get. And I love the idea. The concept makes complete sense about that ownership. But I haven't done as much as I'd like to, but I've also haven't seen that many teachers in my experience sort of through PGC and things, lesson observations. I don't think I've seen it used that much. I just feel like there's a massive untapped resource there of getting pupils to take greater ownership of their learning. And I feel like that's something I just would love to do. Because have you got any sort of key principles in terms of how you apply that approach to get them to reflect and own their progress themselves? What advice would you give?
Yeah, this is where I feel like that metacognition sits really well, because it's, metacognition from the EEF says to be one of the most inexpensive resources we have, but makes the biggest impact on student learning and helps them jump grades. So small changes can really make such a difference to students. The metacognition cycles: planning, the monitoring, and the evaluation. So there's 3 different kind of steps. And the way I use metacognition, or skills sets that I have to promote this within my lesson, are different across the 3. So if I may, to build on prior learning, we were doing decimal places recently with my year 7 class. And I went to them going, okay, so what have you been taught in year 6 about place value that could help us here when we're going to round this decimal to 1 decimal place. It's a very subtle change from what do you know to what have you already learned in year 6, in your last school, with me already this term, to help us understand estimating and rounding. So you're bringing that into your lesson first and foremost. And that would be like an opening question. And it would be think, pair, share. So to have a think about what you learned. You know, I would definitely be looking at the Key Stage 2 curriculum to make sure that this was applicable and something they would have learned. I'd be looking at their kind of entry, you know, their tests as well, and make sure that this is, you know, they should know this. So I wouldn't be setting an impossible challenge. I'm building from success. But that kind of question would definitely be something that I would throw into any class as I was opening a topic, because you're already identifying what they know and you're showing that the subjects are linked together straight away.
Yeah, and I love that. Yeah, that, and you're doing that, activating prior knowledge. And I think something I've used like along those lines with a higher set was write down what you know about, and I think it was percentages, and just kind of let them play. And it was quite cool, as just a way of just standing back, and I just wandered around the room and just saw what they were writing on their whiteboards about percentages, and the way they were talking to each other was great, because there was that kind of like, oh yeah, there's that thing. And what was interesting too is some ways were misremembered, or there were misconceptions that kind of came out part of that as well, where people had started. So yeah, I think that's an awesome way of just bringing that to the fore and seeing where they're at.
My favorite thing I've ever done was your starter that you gave us, which was put a number on the board. And that's your answer. How many ways can you find the number 24?
Yeah.
And I gave it to my year 7 class in the first lesson I did with them, because it already gave me indications of where their math was at, because that they don't pull that math from nowhere. That shows me what they already know. And it's such a rich question. That's such a lovely way to do it, because it's like, well, how many creative ways can you find it? How, like, show me your most
show off
creative way. Yeah, like to explore what they've learned, what they think they know, and then you go seeing some of them testing it out with a calculator, and you're like, this is what you want to know. So slight issue sometimes with misconceptions, but if the misconception's there, you can then address it straight away. So plenty of ways you can kind of follow that through. But mate, when you did that starter in last year in our PGCE, I was like, done. That's amazing. That's so helpful, especially with brand new classes.
It is fun. And a big thanks to my sister-in-law, who's a maths teacher, who told me about that. And she told me about that about 10 years ago before I went into teaching. And it just stuck with me as I was like, that's cool. You know, that's just, you know, a really cool. I did it with my top set year 8 this week, double lesson. I needed to break it in the middle with something that would just, you know, re-engage. And we did that 64, and there's a lot of ways of making 64, and they got proper inventive. It was, I was slightly nervous that they were going to come up with things that I would struggle to think through at the front of the class and be, you know, confident I could check. So, I think your work on that kind of metacognitive approach, you know, and that's something I would love to do. One thing, do you have pupils? Do you encourage your pupils to? How do you go about it? Sort of reflecting and writing. I love it when I open a pupil's book and I see them write, I got this wrong because, or in purple pen they've written, next time I need to. That's something that I think I need to really explicitly ask for and encourage, because I think some of my pupils are doing that automatically. They've obviously got really good habits from previously, but not many. And that's something I need to get, and I need to give them the time for, and I'm not very good at that necessarily at the end of the lesson, making sure that there's the time and focus and environment for them to do that. But I feel like there's power there that I should tap into. Is that something you've explored?
Yeah, I do it. So this is where I changed my tack slightly. So with Key Stage 3, it's a lot more exploring. I kind of try and really build on the foundation of what they have. And during a lot of my lessons, we might be doing, say, quite a big worksheet of maybe like 10, 15, maybe 20 questions. You know, that is quite a lot for when you think about it. Halfway through, I'll go, stop. Everyone stop. Pens down, stop. Now, here's your answers for the first few questions. Look at your work. Are you making the same mistakes? Is there a different way that you could be more effective at what you're doing? And if not, if you feel like you're being most effective, what are you doing that helps you to then solve that problem and make sure it's correct every time? So I just get them to stop. And that gives me a chance to go around they're talking to each other. I'm dropping in a few conversations and going, let's review our process. This is the monitoring phase of it. So we've planned by trying to build on the prior knowledge. We're then monitoring. So how is your process of solving these type of problems going? I might even throw a question in there of, how did you know? So say we've done, say, fractions, for instance, for a while, and I've given them a mix sheet of multiplication, division, subtraction, addition. I might then go, well, how did you know that rule to follow? How did you know that? And they were like, oh, well, there's the addition sign there. So because there's addition instruction, I need to make the denominator the same. Perfect. Really well done. Really well articulated. And then somebody might be going, well, it's division. So I just divide 2 by 3. I'd be like, okay, let's look back at our book. Let's retrieve that knowledge. Maybe it was 7 divided by 4. Okay. Well, how did we do that previously? Because is there an easier way of doing that? And they'd be like, oh yeah, miss, keep flip change. And I'm like, okay, now here's the rest of your questions. Off you go. Try that with your new and improved system in place and see how it goes.
Yeah.
So that's my monitoring. That's how I monitor through my lesson as well.
I'm a big fan of that. Get a few questions done, a few minutes of progress. You've taken a look around, stop. But I think there's some bits there that you're using that I could add in terms of just getting them to think more critically and to think, yeah, how did you know? I love that. Yeah, I need to build that in, I think, so that when they then go on to the next set of questions or they go back and revisit that they've thought about it and are ready to apply what they've just learned.
Yeah. And then so we do like exit tickets every 2 weeks or like after we finish a topic. Yep. So a little bit of a mini test after it. And I get my students to predict their score and I get them to star their hardest question. So one, I'm checking for the awareness of progress at the moment, and it's helping me to track and understand how learning is unfolding. Now, the reason I get them to star their hardest question, and this is something that I've been doing since my PGCE, is it allows me to see if they're struggling with process or application of skill. Because if their hardest question is number 1, 2, or 3, when I'm getting them to the process, that's a real big indicator that they don't have a solid foundation of knowledge. If they're starting the application to, say, algebra or to geometry, okay, I need to spend more time developing the application of how we apply fractions to geometry or finding the area of a square or the worded questions. So having them star the hardest question gives me so much information because I know exactly who my students are that I need to support and the ones I need to challenge more and how I can support them to develop. And then the score helps me to realize who's got confidence with this. So I can then be thinking about who's got most confidence, what do they think they're going to get. That's a lot more of Key Stage 4 even, because I'm really wanting to try and hone those skills, so deepen that knowledge for them as well.
Yeah, that's good. I like the exit. And those exit tickets, are they departmentally produced and you then apply those, or are those ones? Yeah, cool. No, that's for.
Yeah.
I think one of the most useful things I've found has been my own sort of exit tickets, which I've used, and I've tended to use them about 2/3 of the way through a topic, particularly with my year 9 and 10 classes, where I think I've got a good feel for where they're in terms of their understanding, but I feel like I've got a bit of room still. I've got 2 or 3 lessons left on the topic, perhaps, to catch up on misconceptions. But I just want confidence that we're as to where we are before I move on to the sort of more stretch questions and more application questions, and make sure they've got those solid foundations. And I've just done that by putting two or 3 questions on the screen, and they do them on slips of paper and hand them in. But that has been so, like, the insight you get from that is just brilliant, because you're like, you see where
I know.
You can see not only are they getting it right or wrong, but you can see why and the process they're using. And sure, some of them may be looking over the shoulder of the person next to them and copying a bit. So it's not an absolutely perfect measure, but I think it's one of the better measures. Yeah, so I found that really useful. And then when I've been able to adjust those final lessons on the topic to either kind of go back and really make sure the foundations are correct before I build on that again, or actually, if they're all ready, to move them on, or as is often the case, I've got some people who are ready to fly to the next stage, some people who are struggling a bit, who need a bit more time on the basics, and then a bunch in the middle who are about where I hope them to be. So I think that info is so valuable. Yeah, and
so for my Key Stage 3, when I have when we do little worksheets and I want to look at it before they put it in their book, I have a green, an orange, a yellow, and a red tray. And as they exit, they put it in one of the 3 trays about how they feel they did. So it's a really clear. Everyone knows a traffic light system. Whilst reflection is a core part of metacognition, their brains are still developing. And sometimes with the Key Stage 3, I'll use more obvious kind of ways for them to just choose choose what tray you put it in. That's your choice. If you want to put it in green and you've got everything right, perfect. And you almost get a little bit more from that without having them to try and verbalize it, because I don't want to limit them by saying they can't verbalize at that age. But it's just a little bit easier because it's just visual and not finding words, that's a little bit more tricky for the younger ones to do that.
No, I like that. And I think sometimes we're just, having, as you say, just tailoring it to the pupils you've got. I mean, one thing I think I would like to consider using, but it's tricky with access to devices, is one of the challenges with some of these is going through 32 exit tickets, and it, depending on the style, could take a bit of time. I have been wondering whether I could apply a kind of an online system approach that may be beneficial to an extent in that. So that's
I have too. I've been thinking about that.
Have you tried that at all, or are you where I'm at, which is I like the concept, but I haven't quite worked it out yet?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking about it. So I have little booklets. So for my evaluation stage of metacognition, after my module extra ticket, I get my students to answer a question, like a reflective question. I give them a choice of 3 or 4 reflective questions, mostly for my key stage 4, and they have a specific booklet for this. So I bought some booklets, and it's only for their metacognition. And this was based off of my PGCE Assignment 3 project, which you've seen. Yes. Are you getting it out? You're so getting out. Yes, absolutely. So it's based on this, where I've now got my year 10s and year 9s to rate them their knowledge of a topic as we start. So we always start with a open mind map of tell me everything you know about bounds. Tell me everything you know. And then after that, I'll get them to then rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10 of how confident they feel. And they now also rate what they think they'd get on their exit ticket now based on their knowledge. And then we go through the whole process, and then they do the exit ticket. They obviously rate themselves again. They put what they think they're going to get, and then they get their ticket back, and then they actually see their score. From there, the next lesson, when we do a little bit of a fix up, like what did you make? Like what did you miss? Let's do a little bit of kind of revision on that quickly. I get to them to then get their metacognition book out, and they answer a reflective question. Based on, it might be like, looking back at your answers, what did you feel most confident with? What could you have done differently? So what question challenged you? So we obviously go through the answers on the exit ticket. If you were to sit the test again tomorrow, what would you do differently to improve your score? So there's different questions per topic, and it's sometimes a bit more linked to, bounds or whatever we've been doing. They then evaluate their own progress. So did you meet your goal? Did you increase your confidence? Why did you not? You're getting them to then reflect on their process, which is so key to thinking deeply, because you put yourself there for a reason. Find out why. Let's develop this process. And it's taken me a little while for it to really start, that we've now gone through 3 or 4 different topics, and they're getting it. They go, oh, miss, are we now bringing our metacognition booklets out? I'm like, yes, we are. Yes, we are. It's just want them to really start taking that a little bit deeper. And that to me is where that thinking hard comes from. So this is kind of where I bring those reflective questions in a lot more, as that evaluation stage, thinking about that, and then we move on.
But I think there's such a massive part of that is that ownership that people feel is so big and positive, and I don't feel is embedded in as much, certainly in my teaching and in some of the teaching I've seen, as it probably should be. And I remember once been observed in my first placement last year, and the teacher saying to me, he said, yeah, it's a good lesson. However, and he said, you worked really hard in that lesson, didn't you? I was like, yeah, I think I did. Yeah, actually, I don't think your pupils worked hard enough. I think you should have made them do more of the work, and that really sort of stuck with me. And I think this approach that you're talking about, it's transferring that, rather than you sort of having complete responsibility for that progress and this sort of metacognitive process of 32 individuals, actually each of them being empowered to take their own ownership of that, and you being the one who sort of supports and kind of coheres that. I think, okay, I feel once inspired and daunted.
No, you have to remember, look, we know how to help them translate the words into an equation. We know that. We're math teachers. That's our job.
Yep.
We can do that. But what the student knows, and every student knows, is knowledge of themselves, how they approach math problems. That's where they need to put into place, because what we don't know wholeheartedly is them and their approach to math problems. We can start learning it, but they are ultimately the experts on them and how they approach things, how they approach revision, how they approach their learning.
Yeah.
So when you start giving them that back to them, they like to think they feel valued in my class, because I do that. And I go, I don't know, I can teach you math, but you can teach me about you. And we can work together. But it's still for them to think harder, because it's their qualification.
Well, which is setting them up. One of the other massively important bits about this is that, yeah, sure, in many ways, our job is to help prepare them for the exams and sort of academic success in the short term. But actually, in terms of preparing them with the life skills and skills for future academic success, and they've got to own that in future because we're not always going to be there for them. So,
exactly.
That's why it becomes so important, because they've got to own their own development.
Yeah. And also, like, I don't remember, did I say on the podcast a while ago that I was doing whole school CPD on metacognition? I was helping out with it. Yeah. So this is the CPD I gave. Well, this is like around the topic I was involved with. I didn't do very much of it, but I still did it in front of all of my school, which was so nerve-wracking, by the way. I gave like these tips to my school. I'm having teachers of different topics come up saying that they use this. So yesterday, my ECT lead came up to me saying, hey, that starring the answer and predicting the grades, I use that in my lesson and it's been a game changer. And I was like, what? And I was like, that's so awesome that you feel like it's given you something. It's given you another tool to your arsenal to use, that you feel like you're starting to understand your kids, that you're using it. That's amazing. I can't be more happy.
That is awesome. I mean, that to have the impact that you're having as an ECT1 already across the school.
But it's okay. Yeah. But for me, when I think about teaching standard 2, which is what we're talking about, and that promoting good progress and outcomes by students, this is, you whack any of that in here, be accountable for their, their attainment, their progress. Well, I can be, because I can literally show you where they're at, and I can show you their learning. I can show you how they're thinking, reflect on their progress. Yep. Doing that. Demonstrate knowledge of how pupils learn and the impact of teaching. Yep. We could do that as well. Like, this is ticking in my eyes. It's not the sole thing, but it's a core part of my teaching where it's ticking all of those boxes for me. And that's what I kind of really be mindful of, encourage students to take responsibility and attitude towards the work and learning. I feel like that's where it ticks.
Oh, completely. Yeah. And I think absolutely. And I was just looking back at the sort of teacher standards, like the sort of summary, there's 5 bullet points for this teacher standard. And I think what you've talked about just links across all of those, particularly those bottom 3. And as you say, finally, that pupils taking their responsibility for their own work and study. Mate, as always, that is awesome. So I feel like I need to, and I always have this challenge, as you can imagine, in front of me are my sort of mind maps. And I'm just trying to sort of think, how do I best take this away and put it into my own practice? And I think...
Nice. Love the mind maps.
I think for me, there's bits where I feel like actually I can build on what I've already done. And I think the value of those exit tickets, what I think I could do with building on top of that is, you thought about the sort of the hardest question and predicting the score. But I think one key bit that's useful for them is to be given that you thought you did really well in this, you actually did do really well in this, or you thought you'd done badly in this, but you actually did quite well. I think that helps them align their perception of where their performance is with their actual performance. I think that's something I need to add into my exit tickets, is the sort of metacognitive element of that and helping them take great ownership. So that's definitely one. I think your trays on the way out, it's sort of confidence, but links to that as well. And I think you're halfway through, not just stop ticks or crosses next to your work so far. How did you get it right or wrong? That's making sure that they think a bit more deeply about that, and how can you be more effective? Why have you been effective? What tip would you write to yourself? I occasionally do that at the end of a lesson. I'll say, write yourself your top 3 tips on this. And I've been impressed how pupils have responded to that, and some of them have done some amazing thinking, and they've put some brilliant tips, which will actually be genuinely really helpful for them then and in future. So I think I need to expand a bit more about on that. So I suppose that's my takeaways in trying to distill all these big things we discussed. How can I actually do something? I think those are probably it for me.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
I mean, those are great takeaways. For me, like, my next step is really trying to, feel like I want to start trying to show my students where we're going. And I did this a lot during my PGCE, and for some odd reason, I've not carried that through, probably because it's just so busy right now. But there's 2 things I really want to focus on now to really deepen my next step of how I do this. Is at the beginning of a topic or like the end of a topic, I want to show them where we're going to be taking this. So like when we do algebra. So when we do geometry, guys, this is going to be really helpful to use, when we have 2A on one side and 4A on another, finding the perimeter, and I want to maybe start showing them the links before we get there so that I can then go, oh, guys, okay, so when we got there back in September, really start showing them how we're going to send this through.
The sort of schema development. Yes. I think that's good.
So that's one thing I want to do. The other thing I want to do is, so in the ITT ECF under this one of it is increase challenge with practice and retrieval of knowledge becomes more secure. And that's removing scaffolding, lengthier spacing, and introducing interacting elements. So now what I want to do is revisit that later to make sure that knowledge is still secure. So whilst it's being secured now, because I haven't been teaching long enough, I want to come back to that later on and be like, right, here's a few questions from what we did last term. Let's see how we get on. Let's see how secure this is so I can really start understanding if this is a solid foundation. Or is this because it was current?
Yeah.
And bringing that through. So that's kind of where I think I'm going to go next. And then thinking about how I could do that more long term. That's where I'd like to go. Those are kind of my two next steps, I think.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and I think something I've been really enjoying, and generally I managed to keep up with it, is on the back wall of my classroom is amazing. It's just covered in huge whiteboards. And as we've been going through a topic, I've been adding to the sort of mind map of the topic, the key sort of concepts and skills there. And I think that's been useful. It's, I suppose, not quite sort of forecasting, but it helps draw those links between the different areas of what we're studying. And it's been great to be able to go back to that and say, so you remember, eyes on me, please, back of the room here. So on this board here, this is what we covered last lesson, and this is where it links in, and actually that's what it links into. And I think that building up that sort of mind map, that schema in every, and having something visual and big and kind of that's there every lesson has been useful for that. But I think what you're saying is there's kind of a bit of a next step of that, which is to help sort of show the way we're going and the route that's coming up, and building that huge network of connected concepts that our pupils are building.
Yeah, exactly. But it's also this, right, what you're learning now, you're going to use tomorrow. Because I think sometimes where everything feels so instant in this world, I don't know if they always see where they're going with it or the purpose of it. But if you're building this knowledge now, this is where I'm going to take you. Even if I'm just flashing up a GCSE question and going, this is what I want you to solve. And this is how we're going to use it to get to that first step.
Yeah.
You've already, that won't harm them to see it, because then they go, okay, so I actually need to remember this because Miss is going to ask me in 6 months' time about this. And this is how it works. And this is where we're going. And I'm really like, I can feel like that would be helpful. I'll let you know if it is or not.
Right.
I'll let you know if it is or not.
This sounds like another one we need to put on the, we're planning an end of term sort of catch up, aren't we? So I think some of these items we've discussed, we've had some sort of thoughts on things we're going to try and do. I'm really looking forward to our end of term catch up and doing a bit of reflecting on the progress we've made ourselves. That links back to this teaching standard as we take responsibility for our conscientious attitude to our work and study. Yeah.
And we've had a lot of like really good information. Like we've had Claire give us our math acronym challenge.
Yes.
We need to revisit. There's so much we need to revisit. So yeah, our last episode of this term is just going to be a nice, lovely little let's just chat about what we've been doing.
That would be good. Anything else you want to cover before we sort of jump to a bit of a plenary?
No, but I do have a really good plenary for you.
Here we go. A bit metacognition. Go on.
Yeah, it actually is a little bit metacognition. I just thought of it on the spot as well.
Go on. Okay.
No,
give me thinking time.
So I will do. I'll give you a think, pair, share.
That's what it is. Go for it.
Okay, so I've thought of it on the spot. We talk a lot about monitoring our pupils' progress. What are you doing to monitor your own progress?
Okay, that is good, actually.
Sometimes, Francis, I have some good questions in my head.
Sometimes you always do. Yeah. So actually, as part of the ECT training at my school, and I'm sure it's similar at yours, we fill out a sort of weekly, in my mentor meeting each week, I'm filling out a kind of mentor log. And that's been useful, sort of a couple of a side or two of A4 with keynotes from the session. And I think I was doing that previously at the last few weeks in a sort of relatively, we were filling it out during the meeting itself. And that was quite useful. But the last week, instead of filling out during the meeting, actually before the meeting, I spent some time thinking a bit about it, spent about 20 minutes the evening before, really reflecting myself and coming up with the points and the evidence that rather than filling out the meeting form in the meeting, I came in with a framework already there and the key points. And I was surprised how helpful that was. And it made for a much better meeting. But it also, I think that sort of individual reflection before reflecting on someone else was really helpful. So I think that for me has been one of the little changes I've just made that's really helped. You need I think for me, structure is beneficial to the sort of reflection process. That weekly catch-up is good. I do make notes and have thoughts and things as I go on, but I'm not very good at, say, each lesson making a note of how did things go and recording that. So I think for me, ultimately, it's probably going to be making better use of that weekly one that's part of my ECT development anyway. That's, I think, where I see myself having the sort of biggest gain there and having something useful that I can kind of go back to. And one thing we do in that is go back to last week's notes and kind of check how I'm getting on. So I think that's one for me. I expect you've got a sort of slicker system that's probably rather more impressive. How about you?
I don't know about that. I don't think I'd ever call myself slick. Like any of my systems be slick. They're probably very extensive and overzealous, to be fair, is more of an appropriate word. So like you, I use that structured reflection. So I'll choose a lesson. Sometimes my worst, my best. I'll just choose a lesson, and for 10 minutes, I'll just reflect on the good, the bad, and the ugly is what I really call it.
Yep.
And it's just me at my desk. I have a notebook where it's not titled, but it's just a lesson a day. I'll just take a reflection and go. If I was to be observing myself, I'm sure our PGCE professional studies mentor, Tim, would love that. Taking a different lens, shall we say. All my different lenses. Sometimes I take a student lens. Sometimes I take my lens. Sometimes I take...
Yeah.
If somebody was to walk in my room, what would they see? If Ofsted was to come in, I've used an Ofsted lens before. If they were to walk past, how would they see that I was adapting my learning for my students? And I just spend 10, 15 minutes just writing down my thoughts. And with that in mind, it just gives me space to feel like I'm not sitting in my bubble. During even PGC and ECT1, you can sit there and feel like everything is really horrendous and you're doing everything wrong. But I think if that you're looking from it from your point of view, because you know your lessons, you know what you planned, you're the only one that knows that in your room. Nobody else knows that. So I feel like taking a different lens sometimes. And I might keep a book behind, as in like a pupil's book. And I sometimes keep my board flashed up or have my clicker, and I'll sit to the back of the room in a student suit and I'll just flick. Can I see the learning journey through that lesson? Does it match what was in the previous lesson? Where am I going next? So I'll just really take it from those different points of view for 10, 15 minutes and just check myself.
Oh, I like that.
Really.
I like the way that you don't just, I think there's always a temptation to pick your worst lesson. I think there's a risk that you only ever say, well, I didn't think that went well, and you pull that apart. And I think maybe there's real benefit in doing that, but I think there's also benefit in like if something went well or went okay. I like the idea of looking at those as well, because ultimately if something went well, why did it go well? Like, it probably wasn't just chance.
Yeah, and I think what I then do is that then helps me to start identifying patterns of what's working well, but actually I want to start understanding what makes great teaching for my lessons. So I tend to just sit there and I'll do a different year group a day. So if I've done year 7 yesterday, I won't do year 7 again. So I'll start learning what's working for each unit. And I guess I'm kind of developing like a bank of knowledge for each year of kind of how's it going, really.
Yeah, mate, that's awesome.
Yeah, but then when you think about but when you think about teaching standard 4, about planning and teaching well-structured lessons, I feel like this naturally comes before that because it is a cycle.
Yes.
So I feel like if I'm doing this well, I can then start planning and teaching well as well. So I feel like these link really well together. And when we come to that, we could maybe go back and think about, so we've had some reflections. How have we put that into our lessons to make our lessons better?
Well,
so maybe that could be our starter for when we come to teaching standard 4.
Yeah, and then into 5 as well for adapting teaching for strengths and needs of individuals.
Yeah.
And then it's going to be driven to an extent by 6 assessment. So.
And 7 managing behaviors in a classroom. There you go.
Yeah, you're right. And that's why this is so fun, because I'm increasingly seeing teaching as problem solving in a positive way. I like solving problems, but in terms of like, okay, what's the challenge and how can I go about that? And knowing that a change in one area will impact others. For example, you can't look at one teaching standard in isolation. Well,
absolutely.
Mate, it's been so good to have a wonderful weekend. Do get some downtime and keep going. Not too long until the end of term.
Yeah, absolutely. But everyone, thanks for listening in, and we see you guys again very soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Fraction of a Teacher. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed recording it. Please share a link with your fellow teachers and friends. New episodes released every Tuesday morning at 5 o'clock.
And if you do love it, I suggest you hit that subscribe button, leave us a review, and follow us on social media at Fraction of a Teacher Podcast for updates, so you never miss anything. We do love hearing from you with your questions, your thoughts, and your ideas. So if you have any, please email us at fractionoat@gmail.com. Until next time, keep smiling.
and keep solving those problems.